Greetings to all. Yesterday, on 1st February 2008, there were about a dozen Western religious scholars who visited India to study different religions. They came to Maulana Waiduddin Khan to ask and understand more about Islam. Today, we will be presenting the same set of questions which they had asked Maulana. The first question was, what is the ideology of Islam?
I think that the very name of Islam tells us the ideology of Islam. Islam, the name of this religion is Islam. Islam is an Arabic word, and every Arabic word has some root word. So, Islam is derived from Silm. Silm is the root word of Islam. S-I-L-M. Silm means peace. So, Islam means religion of peace. If you read Quran, you will find that Islam, if you read Quran, you will find that Quran gives great emphasis on peace. According to my study, I can say that in Islam, peace is the summum bonum, greatest good. Why? Because without peace, you cannot do anything. Even prayer, it requires peaceful atmosphere. Without peaceful atmosphere, you cannot do anything. So in Islam, peace is the summum bonum. Then if you read Quran, you will find that there are 99 names of God Almighty, and one name is As-Salam. One name of God is As-Salam. As-Salam means peace. So God Himself is God of peace. Then the Prophet of Islam is referred in the Quran as Rahmatul lil Alameen. It means that Prophet of Islam was a prophet of peace. Then the most important thing in Islam is paradise. Paradise is the only goal. And one name of paradise is Darus Salam. Wallahu yadu ila Darus Salam. And God calls to the home of peace. Then there is a verse in the Quran, As-Sulhu Khair. This verse gives us the general policy of Islam, and that is peace. As-Sulhu Khair means peaceful method is the best. Peaceful solution is the best. So in every aspect, Islam is a religion of peace. Here I can say that there is no war in Islam other than defensive war. Other than defensive war, there is no war in Islam. For example, proxy war, guerrilla war, offensive war, undeclared war. All these wars are unlawful in Islam. So I can say that Islam is a religion of peace in complete sense of the word.
Why do Muslims and Jews fight in spite of the great similarity between their religions?
It is a fact that there are similarities among Judaism and Islam, and recent fighting between the two communities is not a religious war, not at all. It is a political war. Two communities are at war and not two religion. You know, the war is for what purpose? For land. Both want land, that is Palestine. So it is not a religious war. It is a land for war. It is a war for land. So it is a political war. I don't think that this war in Palestine has any relevance to the religion of Islam. This is completely a political war or leadership war.
What is the solution of the Palestinian problem according to your opinion?
According to my opinion, there is only one solution, that is, accept the status quo, accept the political status quo. You cannot change the status quo. It is impossible. You can go to suicide bombing, you can go to self-destruction. So all these armed activities or the violence only produce some negative result. No positive result is possible through these violent activities. Then I believe that Jewish community was in diaspora. So when they returned to Palestine, it was returned to their home. So I think that Muslims should welcome to this community. If they have adopted this policy, that it was possible to live in Palestine, it was possible to live with complete harmony. But they refused to welcome to those Jews. So I think that this was not a right policy. Even today, there is no option other than to accept the status quo for both the communities. If you are not ready to accept the status quo, then this violence will continue. It's meaningless violence. Present violence is meaningless in Palestine. No positive result is possible through this violence. So the first step is to stop this violence and go to the negotiation table. I think that if you read Quran and Hadith, you will find that in Islam, only one kind of activism is permitted, that is peaceful activism. Islamic activism is peaceful activism. Violent activism is not permitted in Islam.
What is your view on terrorism, specifically with respect to the WTC incident?
I think that in Islam you find a very, very clear definition of terrorism. People are confused on this subject. You cannot find a consensus about the definition of terrorism. But in Islam you can find a very, very clear definition. And that is use of arm by agencies other than state. That is terrorism. Because there is a well accepted principle in Islam, that is ar-rahilu lil imam. It means that to go to war is a prerogative of state. So no organization, no agency is allowed to go to war except state. By this definition, you can say that all those activities, all those violent activities that are conducted by agencies other than state, that is terrorism. So I can say that according to Islamic teachings, there is only one war, that is defensive war. And as far as the people are concerned, people are free, they are allowed to struggle for their goals. But they have no option other than to adopt peaceful method. No excuse whatsoever allows to adopt violence or suicide bombing. All these things are completely unlawful in Islam. If you see that you cannot achieve the goal by peaceful method, then you have to keep patience. As-sabr. Sabr means patience. So either there are only two options. Either you keep patience or adopt peaceful activism. There is no third option for you.
क्या कह रहे थे सभी? आप कुछ कह रहे थे ना मेरे को? करूं? अच्छा, एक बार ऐसे देख के फिर. Do you think USA was right when it bombarded Iraq?
It is a very difficult question. It is a very difficult question. I would like to say that USA demanded Saddam to leave the throne. At that time, I published an article with the title "Option for Saddam." I said in this article that Saddam Hussein was dictator of Iraq. There is no democracy in Iraq. So he was a dictator. And he ruled Iraq up to more than 20 years. That was enough. Now, there are two options before him. Either to go to war against USA or leave the government. I think that the best option for him was to leave the government. Why? Because there was a president in America, Jefferson. President Jefferson was president of America but he never tried to gain the second term. Instead, he opted for education. He established a university. I think that this option was free for Saddam Hussein. You know, there were 8 palaces owned by Saddam Hussein, and then there was enough money in his disposal. So it was, I said in this article, this is the best option for Saddam Hussein to leave the government and establish some colleges or universities in these palaces. And by this, he will serve Iraq in a better way. But he refused to opt for this choice, and he started war. So it is not correct to say that only USA was wrong. Both were wrong. I would like to say that both were wrong. But as Saddam Hussein was in a weaker position and USA was in a stronger position, so in such a situation, the best option for Saddam was to opt for peaceful activism, for educational activism, rather than political activism or war.
How do we know that interfaith organizations are non-political? What is your definition of non-political?
According to my definition, non-political means non-confrontational. In our present age, everything is politics. Everything is politics. But you have to differentiate between political action and confrontational action. So I don't think that politics is a taboo. But confrontation is a taboo. War is a taboo. Violence is a taboo. So when politics means going to violence, to war, to intolerance, to confrontation, then politics becomes a taboo. So according to my opinion, there are two ways of action: peaceful action and violent action. So according to my experience, the best option for a reformer is non-political action or peaceful action. Any political action that involves confrontation, that is taboo in Islam.
What does jihad means?
Jihad is an Arabic word. It literally means to strive, to struggle. So jihad has nothing to do with violence or war. Jihad simply means peaceful struggle. There is a very relevant verse in the Quran in this regard. Quran says, وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ جَهَادًا كَبِيرًا. It means that do great jihad with the help of the Quran. Now you know that Quran is a book of ideology. Quran is not a sword, not a gun, not a bomb. So how you can do violent jihad through Quran? It is not possible. So jihad through Quran means ideological campaign, peaceful struggle, non-confrontational activities. That is jihad in Islam. It is a perverted form of jihad, which is now known as jihad. Then I would like to say that there are two different words in the Quran, qital and jihad. Qital and jihad. Qital means war, and jihad means peaceful struggle. So qital, that is war, is permitted only in a defensive situation. Otherwise there is no qital, no war. And jihad is a permanent feature of Islam because it is a peaceful struggle for a noble cause. Even if you work for education, that is jihad. If you work for dawah work, that is jihad. If you work for social reform, that is jihad. So any peaceful struggle that in which any peaceful struggle in which violence is not involved, that is jihad.
Quran says do great jihad. Quran says do great jihad with the Quran. Will you repeat? Okay. Quran says do great jihad with the Quran. Does this mean that everybody has to accept Islam?
Not at all. It is a wrong notion that Quran says that you have to Islamize the whole world. It is wrong. Islam believes in difference. There is a very relevant hadith. Hadith means saying of the Prophet of Islam. So he says that ikhtilafu ummati rahmatun. It means that difference is a blessing of God. Difference of opinion is a blessing of God. Why? Because it is difference that creates the atmosphere of discussion. Where there is no difference, there is no discussion, no dialogue. Or without discussion and dialogue, there is no intellectual development. So difference leads to discussion, dialogue, and dialogue leads to intellectual development. This is the Islamic position in this regard. There is no such verse in the Quran that says that you have to Islamize the whole world. No, not at all. The main stress of Islam is to develop your personality. Only developed personality can be allowed to go to paradise. So intellectual development, personality development, and spiritual development and intellectual development, these things are depends on difference. Without difference, there is no development. Difference means intellectual challenge. Difference creates a challenging situation. It's very good. Difference means intellectual challenge. And where there is intellectual challenge, you will try to meet that challenge. So process begins. This is the process of intellectual development. Where there is process, there is where there is difference, there is intellectual challenge, and where there is intellectual challenge, there is discussion and dialogue, and where there is discussion and dialogue, there is intellectual development. This is the best expression of Islam.
Do you have any difficulties in persuading Muslims about your interpretation of Islam?
Not at all. The majority of Muslim intellectuals agree with my interpretation. This interpretation is not my interpretation. It is accepted interpretation. It is not new. You know, Quran is an eternal book. Islam is an eternal religion. So all the teachings of Islam have eternal aspect. There is no such rituals in Islam which you find in other systems. If you read Quran, you will find that Islam always, if you read Quran, you will find that Quran always speaks about universal ideas, universal concepts, universal notions. So Islam is an eternal religion. What is required is that you have to interpret Islam in modern term, modern idiom. What I am doing is only to translate Islam into modern idiom. It is not new interpretation. I am not giving Islam a new interpretation. What I am doing is only to try to express Islam in modern idiom, in modern language, in modern style. So there is no difference at all. And you know, I can say that Muslims have accepted my ideas. For example, in Kashmir, you know, previously there was fighting, there was violence, but now there is no such violence. How? It is, the credit goes to our mission. They read our books, they read our magazine, Risala. There are so many subscribers in Kashmir of Risala monthly. So they find in these writings the peaceful interpretation of Islam. They accepted it. And now you can see that there are peace in the Kashmir. Even in India, after 1947, there was communal riots every day. But now there is no communal riot in India. Here also the credit goes to our mission. These Muslims were engaged in communal riots, but now when they read our books, our magazine, they found that Islam is a religion of peace. I gave them the formula: ignore the problem and avail the opportunities. So now they have adopted this formula. Ignore the problem and avail the opportunities. I told them that problem is a part of society, part of life. In every society there are problems. It's not problem of India, problem of nature. So there is no escape from problem. So I told them that you have to ignore the problems. That is part of life. And there are so many opportunities in India. You know, there are 57 Muslim countries, but according to my experience, for Muslims, India is the best country. Why? All kind of progress and development needs two things: peace and freedom. So in India, you can find peace and freedom both. So where there is peace and where there is freedom, there all the opportunities are available there. So this is India. So Muslims of India accepted my formula, and now they are living in peace in India, and there is no communal riots.
What is the proportion of those who are educated as against those who are not educated in among Muslims? I have to repeat. What is the proportion of those who are educated as against those who are not educated among Muslims?
I think that majority of Muslims are educated. Education is widespread among Muslims, but they are backward in modern education. Here is the problem. They are backward. They are not backward in education per se, but they are backward in modern education. There is a well-known Arab leader, Amir Shakib Arsalan. He published a book, لماذا تأخر المسلمون وتقدم غيرهم. This was the title of that book. It means that why Muslims became backward and others became forward. So in this book he mentions that Muslims abandoned jihad, so they became backward. I published an article that this is wrong. Muslims never abandon jihad. They are engaged in jihad since 200 years. So they never abandoned jihad. The real reason of Muslims' backwardness is that they became backward in modern education. This is the main reason. So Muslims are not backward in education per se, but Muslims are backward in modern education. So I am a great advocate that Muslims must compensate this. They must educate their generations in colleges and universities. Here is the problem. There are many madrasas. Every masjid is also madrasa, and there are millions of madrasa everywhere in the country. But Muslims are backward in modern education. So they must compensate this. They must educate their generations in school and colleges, and I think there is no other shortcoming in Muslim people. Muslim people are better in every other aspects except modern education. So here is the problem.
What is your educational background?
I am a product of madrasa. I was educated in Arabic madrasa. So all my formal education I completed in madrasa. Then after completing my madrasa education, I found that in our present world, it is very important to know the modern thought, modern science, modern knowledge, modern mind. So I privately studied English and all other modern sciences, and after studying English and modern sciences, I started my mission. So I completed my formal education in madrasa. Then through private study, I studied English and modern books, modern thought, modern sciences, to know the present world. You know, there is a hadith, أن يكون بصيرا بزمانه. Muslims must know his contemporary world. So I wanted to know the contemporary world, the modern world. For this purpose, I studied modern sciences. So after doing this, I started my mission.
How do you practice your brand of Sufism, which you call contemplative Sufism?
You know, there are two kinds of Sufism: traditional Sufism and scientific Sufism. Traditional Sufism is based on meditation, that is muraqabah or dhyan gyan. But my Sufism, modern Sufism or scientific Sufism, I am a Sufi, but my Sufism is based on contemplation, that is tadabbur, tafakkur, tadakkur, tawassum. This is contemplation. So my Sufism is based on study, on observation, on contemplation. My study is based on mind rather than heart. Traditional Sufism is based on heart, but my Sufism is based on mind. So there are two different kinds of Sufism: heart-based Sufism and mind-based Sufism. So my Sufism is based on mind. Its method is through intellectual development. My Sufism is based on intellectual development. This is the difference. You can call it Neo-Sufism. I can say that I am founder of this school. I am founder of this Sufi school. I am founder of this Sufi school, so you can say that it is Neo-Sufism.
How is mysticism different from Sufism? Would you call yourself a mystic?
No, I am not mystic. Mystic or mysticism is a mysterious word. It is a scientific word. Mystic people believe some mysterious ways that is based on meditation and other kind of practices. But I have no interest in these mysterious things. I am a scientific, I have scientific taste and scientific mind, scientific temperament. So I am not interested in mysterious kind of spirituality or mysticism. I am interested in scientific kind of Sufism, that is Neo-Sufism.
What is your mission?
My mission is based on Islam. based on Islam. Although I'm a great believer of religious understanding, religious tolerance, and religious dialogue, but I can say that my mission is based on Islam. By Islam, I means the pure religion that is kept in Quran. Present Muslims, I always say that you have to differentiate between Islam and Muslims. There are many practices among Muslims that is not Islamic. So my Islam is derived from the Quran and Hadith. I can say that I have rediscovered Islam. I published a book with this title, Islam Rediscovered. After long study, I have rediscovered Islam. So I compiled this book. So my Islam is based on peace, it is based on tolerance, it is based on compassion, it is based on dawah, it is based on non-political activities. So my Islam is not based on war and violence. It is based on spirituality. There is a verse in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So I say that Islam promotes Rahmat culture. Rahmat culture. That is my Islam. And this Islam I have found in the Quran. I have no Arabic language. I studied Quran and Hadith from its original sources. Then I formed this kind of thinking.
What have been the tangible achievements of your mission so far?
I can say that my mission is very successful mission. But there are two kinds of missions. One that is crowd pulling mission. So my mission is not in the sense a crowd pulling mission. Because crowd pulling missions are those that are based on some kind of emotional slogans, emotional approach, some kind of political problems. So I am not interested in such kind of emotional slogans. But my mission addresses the intellectuals, educated minds. In this sense, I can say that everywhere in the world you will find some people who have read my literature through books, through internet, through magazines, through interviews, through TV, through radio. So people are aware of my mission in not only in the Muslim world, but in non-Muslim world also. And the majority of those people agree that this is the only mission, this is the only peaceful mission, and this is the only correct version of Islam. So everywhere in the world there are thousands and thousands of people who agree with the veracity of our mission. This is our success. Our mission is not based on a very rigid type of organization. There is no membership. In our mission, there is no membership. But we believe in loose kind of organization without membership. In this sense, you will find that many people are attached with our mission in India and also in abroad.
What is your opinion about Buddhism?
You know, Buddhism is a godless religion. Buddhism is not. I don't subscribe with the ideology of Buddhism. You know, the ideology of Buddhism is based on Punarjanma theory. They believe that there is a cycle of birth. All those people who have taken birth in this world, they will find rebirth in this world again, according to their kartav, their character. But this kind of thinking is simply a speculative thinking. If there is such kind of cycle of birth, then we must know. But you know, no one knows that previously I was born in this world and I am born again in this world. We have no memory in our past. No one has memory in about his past. So how you can establish this kind of rebirth theory? This kind of theory that is based on cycle of birth is completely unfounded. So I don't believe this kind of religion. There is no scientific background, there is no scientific ground, there is no scientific base that favors this kind of Buddhist ideology. Although I know that there are many people who believe in Buddhism, but I have studied Buddhism and I found that it has no scientific base. It is simply a theory, a speculative theory. If I was reborn in this world, so I must keep in my mind the memory of my past. And you know, no one has the memory of past. No one knows about his past. So this kind of theory is completely a speculative theory. It has no scientific base, no psychological base, no scientific base. And even, you know, Gautam Buddha was a great soul, but we know very little about his life. It is said that Gautam Buddha saw his past when he was in Dhyan Gyan. He saw his long past, but it is not proved. There is no proof that Gautam Buddha ever said that I have saw my past in my meditation. Not at all. It was developed by other commentator after his death. So the basic creed of Buddhism is not established that this was the creed of Buddha. This creed was developed by his disciples after his death. So I think that historically it is not proved that Buddha said like this.
Can one follow a spiritual path? Can one follow a spiritual path without believing in God?
You know, there are two kinds of spirituality. One is self-based spirituality, and the second is God-based spirituality. There are some people who believe in self-based spirituality. So their belief is based on the notion that in our inner being, our inner being is a reservoir of all kind of knowledge, all kind of wisdom. But it is not proved by science, by any branch of science. It is not proved that we have all kind of treasure in our heart. It is not published. It is not established. So I believe in God-based spirituality. It means that God has revealed His knowledge through prophets. So now we have that revelation in present form, especially in the Quran. So my spirituality is based on the Quran. I believe that God is a living being. God is not a symbolic word. God is a living being. And we can establish contact with God. We can receive inspirations from God. So God is the source of all kind of knowledge. God is the source of spirituality. So my spirituality is based on this concept. Through contemplation, through prayer, I establish contact with God. And then I receive inspiration from God. That is my spirituality. So I don't believe in self-based spirituality. I believe in God-based spirituality.
Hindus and Muslims both believe in God. Is there any difference?
Yes, there is a great difference.
मौलाना एक सेकंड कंप्लीट कर देते हैं. Hindus and Muslims both believe in God. Is there any difference between the concepts?
Yes, there is a great difference. According to my knowledge, although Hindus speak of God, but their God is a symbolic God. Symbolic God. They don't believe in personal God. According to their belief, God is not a person like ours. God is a symbol like gravity or cosmic rays. It is based on, this kind of notion is based on Advaitvad or monism. So Hindus' concept of God is based on monism or Advaitvad. But Muslims believe in personal God. According to Islamic system, God is a person like ours. God is a living being. God is the creator. God has mind like ours. So God is a person in complete sense of the word. So Islamic concept of God is based on monotheism, and Hindu concept of God is based on monism. And there is a vast difference between the two. In Sanskrit, you can say that Hindu concept of God is based on Advaitvad, and Islamic concept of God is based on Dvaitvad. Dvaitvad and Advaitvad. Advaitvad and Dvaitvad are very crucial terms, and by these terms you can understand the concept of both the religion.
Is there any difference between a reformer and a prophet?
Yes, there is a great difference. Reformers are philosophers or thinkers. Reformer has his own plan, his own ideology. Reformer works according to his own ideology. But prophet is a person who receives revelations from God. So prophet is a revealed person who receives revelations from God. But reformer is not a revealed person. He works according to his own ideology. So there is a great difference between the two. God, prophet is a God sent God directly sends a prophet to man. God direct prophets. But the farmer is simply a leader. Simply a leader. He is not a prophet in terms of revelation.
Do you have any scheme for कितना टाइम 2 मिनट है कि 3 मिनट ओके Do you have any scheme for moral reform?
Yes, our mission is a mission of moral reform, but moral reform need intellectual change. We believe that moral reform, the source of moral reform is intellectual revolution, intellectual change. Without intellectual revolution, you cannot bring about moral reform. Then we believe in the concept of accountability. We try to inculcate this concept in every man and woman. Without the concept of accountability, there is no ethics, no morality. Accountability, the concept of accountability makes you responsible, makes you duty conscious, makes you responsible person. So accountability is like a compulsive treatment. Without the concept of accountability, there is no compulsion. Everything becomes voluntary. So we believe in ethics with accountability. Accountability is very, very important because without accountability, without the concept of accountability, there is no responsibility. So our mission tries to inculcate the concept of accountability in every man and woman.